You're listening to the Otis Jiry channel.
Twinkle, Twinkle by T.E. GRAU, performed by Otis Jiry. Emily carefully repositioned the Celestron 1400 HD telescope, a gift from her father for her recent 8th birthday. It was far too expensive, and she begged him off for as long as she could. But he was insistent, and she thankful, especially considering why he bought it. She scrolled to the left in the direction of her mother's writing hand, moving to a deeper, blacker section of the glittering cosmos, while humming the tune to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, as she always did every night while setting up. Her father had advised her to check the darkest area, the cold spots, because that's where the new stars pop up. These empty voids would be the best places to find her mother, who died 3 weeks and 4 days ago tonight. Find her yet? Philip stood in the doorway to the rooftop balcony, clutching a full glass of wine that never seemed to leave his hand these days. Emily smiled sadly at him. Not yet, but I will, she said. She's got to be out there somewhere by now, right? Yeah, I would think so, Philip said, taking a healthy pull from his glass. But sometimes the journey takes a little longer for some. Emily thought about this, then brightened with an idea. Maybe the angels are holding on to her and won't let her go. Philip nodded, scratching his 3-week and 4-day-old beard. Yeah, maybe. Wouldn't you? Oh, yeah, I would for sure, Emily said, returning her eye to the telescope, gripping the pencil in her right hand. I'd squeeze her so tight she'd never go away. Philip found himself nodding as he stared off into the empty gloom, blind to the stars, before turning back to the open balcony door, not sure where he was going or what he was going to do once inside. Don't stay up too late, Monkey, he said. You've got school tomorrow. I won't, Emily said, as she continued scanning and humming, finally quietly breaking into song. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Emily adjusted the refracted lens to probe deeper into the cold spot, marking down her position with each recalibration. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. A bright smudge centered in her finder scope. Emily sucked in a breath, her eye widening past the black rubber hood. Daddy! She cried. Daddy! After a few minutes, Philip ran out onto the balcony. What is it? He asked, slightly winded. I found her, Emily said in an awed whisper, a joyous smile spreading across her tiny, perfectly symmetrical face, nearly dividing it in two. I found Mommy. His brow knitted above a dubious frown. I found her. Come look. Philip stepped unsteadily to the telescope as Emily bounced around him. Look, she said, guiding him to the eyepiece. That part of space is always dark. Always dark, see? Emily grabbed a sheath of vectored paper and showed Philip the intricate star maps she'd been compiling since her birthday 2 weeks prior. She moved her finger past meticulously charted and labeled celestial bodies and pointed to a vacant part of the lower right of the page, somewhere between Eridanus and a stellar grouping called Fornix. He'd never noticed these particular constellations in the weekly horoscope section of the Sunday paper. Eridanus. The super void of Eridanus, Dad. That's where we're looking, where the CMB couldn't find anything, and now Mommy's there. The CMB? The Cosmic Microwave Background Map, she said, with the tone of exasperation particular to little girls of a certain age. Philip's blank expression caused her to shake her hands in frustration. Never mind. It's supposed to be a dead space, 1 billion light years across. That's where they made room for all the new souls, and now Mommy's there. She's there. Dad, can you believe it? He couldn't, and wished that he could, even for 1 second, ashamed at his envy of her blissful ignorance, her faith. Heaven's suburbs, Philip thought. He was incredulous, of course, which was a gentler offshoot of a deeply held cynicism only made worse the last few weeks. But then again, this was Emily. He knew better than to doubt anything she did, even if it was impossible that she had located her mother's detached soul in the deepest reaches of deserted space. Are you sure? He said, vocalizing a different question than how it came out. I'm positive it's Mommy. It's Mommy for sure. Emily raised her arms above her head and did several graceful pirouettes, while Philip double-checked the map, then looked through the scope. He didn't really know what he was looking at on the page, but sure enough, a fuzzy, grayish shape hovered in the midst of nothing but black far up above. And that wasn't there before? In that particular area? No, that's what I'm trying to tell you, Dad. Philip straightened, eyebrows raised. Well. She waited for him to continue, face animated with expectation. This is amazing, Emmy. She beamed, for the first time in what seemed like forever. It really is, Emily exclaimed and hugged her dad, who was thinking more about what could possibly be his daughter's first legitimate astronomical discovery at the wizened age of 8 years and 2 weeks. She thought she had found things before, unnamed comets, rogue asteroids, alien spacecraft, but this somehow felt different. He'd check into it, of course. He'd been doing it for years, from the time of Emily's first star nav at the ripe age of 3. She always seemed to find something meaningful up amongst the stars, regardless of the equipment at hand. Emily ran back to the telescope and looked up into the heavens again. You're right, Daddy. You said she'd come, and she did. She did. Philip sat back in his chair, no longer worried about what this could mean for Emily's future at JPL, instead filled with satisfaction that he had somehow made his daughter happy. A fanciful setup created in vain desperation was somehow paying off. He allowed himself to smile, as the occasion seemed to call for it. I have to mark down this reading so we never lose her again. Emily picked up the map and plotted out the cosmic portion of her heavenly mother. I knew it would be somewhere around Alpha Eridani, because that's the place where the double stars died and all the ghosts live in the supervoid. She jotted down the coordinates on the graph paper, chattering to herself in a sweet, high-pitched voice. Philip wasn't really listening as he watched her with that rare sort of amazement that never seemed to abate. Like a clear dawn that forever kept its magic to the caveman who feared the death of the sun each night, this little creature spreading her music and flame, lighting up a dark world. He had felt that way about Emily's mother, who taught him against all odds that love was shockingly and unquestionably real, and also the source of the greatest pain ever felt inside the fragile shell of the human body. Philip's daughter had what her mother had, a fascinating differentness that changed the air in any room, no matter how stuffy. This unique ability, of course, also set her apart from other children who contented themselves with Barbies and garish cartoons, while Emily was watching documentaries on William Herschel. She was always alone amongst her classmates, and now even more so. The singular always remained single, or at least singled out. Must be so hard for Emily, Philip thought. He lost his wife, the only woman who laid bare his soul and made a wooden puppet into a real boy. But this little girl lost the only mother she'd ever know. She was half-orphaned, and the sadness of that somehow helped distract Philip from the searing knife slowly sawing through his guts screaming for a bullet but settling for wine. "Done," Emily announced proudly, before looking up in the sky, trying to spot the new star with her naked eye, while measuring with an antique sextant her mother had picked up for her at their favorite antique shop in Vermont. They had a cabin there once, before the sickness. Now it rotted away with the damp leaves and the woods. "She's too far away," Emily said, disappointed. "That's what telescopes are for," Philip said, gathering Emily close to him and inhaling deeply the scent from the side of her head that only smelled like she did. "To watch our mommies." Emily liked this. "Can we watch her again tomorrow night, Dad?" she asked with a hopeful smile, leaning her head back on his chest and looking up. "Of course we can, Emmy. Every night from now on." She hugged him close and went back to the telescope, gazing into the infinite reaches of space for what seemed like hours, as Philip dozed off in his chair, praying for dreams. The next day, as he'd done several times in the past, Philip took Emily's position reading to his old college buddy, who now worked in the astronomy department at Caltech, hoping that Emily could have possibly discovered a new star, a spinning chunk of ice, or even far-flung planet, and that she could name it like she did all of her stuffed animals. Each one was named after the moons of Uranus, her favorite planet, partly because of the interesting physical makeup, but mostly because it was tragically underappreciated by astrophysicists in general. She thought about things like that. She thought about so many things a girl her age shouldn't, or shouldn't have to. But she did, and by her logic, why would someone have a doll named Sally when she could have an Umbrielle, Miranda, or Titania? Across town, Emily tried to sit through school the best she could, watching the sun trundle like a lazy snail across the sky, silently cheering its slow creep from horizon to horizon. When the final bell rang, she raced out of the building to the curb, where Philip was waiting to pick her up in his faded beige Subaru. Emily opened the door. 4 hours and 37 minutes to sundown. Philip grinned while putting the car into drive. "I'm not even going to imagine how you know that." Emily looked out the window and up into the sky, cleverly strained blue to hide the real world beyond. She imagined her mother sleeping the day away behind this silken veil, stretching her long, pale limbs at the first blush of twilight, and emerging, hand in hand with the darkness, to look down at her daughter and husband who missed her so incredibly much. Emily turned to her father to tell him her theory, but found him blinking back tears. She wasn't sure if they were the happy or the sad kind, and didn't want to ask. He wasn't used to crying, but he was getting better at it. Emily ate her dinner next to the kitchen window, keeping one eye on the sky and another on the clock above the microwave. "T-minus 14 minutes, Emily said, just as she had 60 seconds prior, and each of the last 7 minutes before that. Philip chuckled tiredly and poured himself another glass of Cabernet, his uneaten food sitting cold in front of him. He liked his wine bone dry these days, and cheaper. The labels all look the same now. The sun flipped down behind the neighborhood's western tree line at Lake Avenue and headed toward the ocean, washing the valley in that distinctive Pasadena azure that kept cinematographers tinkering late into the night. Philip liked this time of day best, when he and his wife would sit on the deck, hatching schemes and making outlandish travel plans that seemed totally plausible during the hopeful haze of magic hour. Emily raced from room to room inside the house while Philip stood on the deck, sinking into his slippers, feeling more alone than he had ever had in his 42 years. She seemed to be taking all of this better than he was. Amazing what faith can do. Even faith in fairy tales and the gentle lies that keep them afloat. At last, the dwindling daylight gave way to darkness, heralded by a "Yahoo!" from the doorway, as Emily clattered outside wearing her mother's favorite Louboutin heels, bebe sash, and Tiffany hoop earrings. Gifts from Philip, as his wife never asked for anything, so Philip naturally wanted to give her everything. All the way to the end. He would now do the same for his daughter, protecting her from pain and tears and death, battling the inexorable with every fiber of his being, every tool at his command. The world would close in soon enough and spoil the dance, but all the while Philip would push back with the force of Atlas, unburdened. "It's time," Emily said. "It's time to see Mommy again." Philip eased back into his chair with his wine, absently tapping the silver band on his left ring finger on the side of the glass. Emily buzzed around the patio, skipping the warm-up humming tonight, and launching straight into the second verse of her song as she carefully arranged her map and made a few last-minute adjustments to the telescope. "When the blazing sun is gone, when there's nothing he shines upon, then you show your little light, twinkle, twinkle through the night. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are." "You're my mom," Emily laughed, answering the lyrics, and looked into the eyepiece. "In the dark blue sky so deep, through my curtains often peep, for you never close your eyes till the morning sun does rise. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are." Philip took a long drink and listened to his daughters sing, realizing for the first time how profound and slightly unsettling the lyrics were. Mommy isn't alone. Emily didn't continue, and his finger stopped tapping. The extended silence shook Philip from his thoughts, and he looked at his daughter. "What do you mean?" "She has friends now," Emily said, her eye glued to the finderscope. Frowning, Philip got up from the chair. Emily stood aside while he squatted on creaking knees to have a look for himself. "See," Emily said. "Lots of them." Philip squinted into the eyepiece and noticed that the fuzzy gray shape from the night before was a little brighter, a little bigger, and now surrounded by several other formless shapes, equally gray and fuzzy. "Mommy's got friends," Emily said. "Lots and lots of friends. Isn't that wonderful?" Philip pulled back, wondering how a formerly vacant block of space could now be populated by a number of new, obviously enormous objects. "Did you adjust the lens to look further out?" "Of course not. I don't want to lose Mommy. It's in the exact same position as last night." As Philip pondered this, and Emily set about naming all of her mother's new companions, his cell phone rang. Philip fished it out of his pocket and noted the number of his friend at Caltech. He answered. "So, is she going to be famous or what?" A loud, terrified voice crackled through the phone, babbling quickly, punctuated by shouts, hasty explanations. Philip's face went pale and he slumped back into his chair. His brain tumbled over what he was hearing. After less than a minute, ending with pleaded commands, the dead phone fell from his hand and Philip looked at Emily, who was talking in hushed tones to herself. The city had gone quiet, but he dared not look up. He pressed a quivering fist into his lips, digging into his teeth, looking for pain, slowly swallowing the words that his brain was struggling to understand. He could hear himself say it, and then fought to bring the words back inside. But he hadn't said anything, hadn't moved, hadn't done a thing when everything around the balcony seemed to drain of color and form, leaving these simple wooden planks fully realized amidst a hostile smear of gray dotted with pinpricks of light. But they weren't just light. The light was just a reflection of what they really were. And yet Emily kept smiling and naming her mother's new friends, which kept Philip moored to the seat to his reality. Demeter, Hestia, Hypnos, Thanatos. Did she know what she was saying? How many were there up there? How many were coming? He downed his wine in one gulp, hoping that he would gag, but knowing that he wouldn't. She rattled off several more names, jumping to new pantheons, her voice becoming muddy in his ears. The music was all wrong. Sweat broke out on his brow, and it felt like blood pooling into his eyebrows. Is everything okay? Emily stared at him with concern. Philip looked at her and worked his jaw, but nothing came out of his mouth. He could never hide anything from her. She was too smart, way too smart for her age. What could he say? He knew that anything that slithered from the hole in his face would choke him and he'd die, and she'd be alone. For this last little while at least. He'd let her down, just like he did her mother. In the end, he wouldn't be able to do a goddamn thing. A tiny, moist hand rested on his arm. Daddy? Emily's eyes brought him back to her, and he somehow forced a smile, feeling as if his neck would snap and send his skull bouncing to the cedar deck. Go look at Mommy, Philip said, wiping his eyes, and all her friends. She returned his smile and hummed, warming to the last verse. Philip fought back his voice, the insanity rolling in his stomach, and the crackled scream on his lips that curdled the wine twisting in his guts. He would say nothing, granting her at least one more night of innocence, gifting her, like with a telescope. God damn that thing and what it saw. But then again, what did it really see? It found Emily's mother, allowing a child a tiny bit of satisfaction that closure brings the grieving. Another gift, however brief, before reality would shatter everything forever. Emily's future life flashed through Philip's mind, making him dizzy, wrenching his eyes shut. Must not look up. His skin crawled. His brain grew fingers, picking through what he was told. This was what it was like to go insane. As tears began to course down his cheeks, Philip leaned back his neck that popped with each angle and opened his eyes to the sky. Emily, her left eye pressed to the scope, cast her happy gaze high up into the space, finishing out her fairy tale mantra in complete and utter joy, that of an innocent calf just outside the slaughterhouse. In the dark blue sky so deep, through my curtains often peep, for you never close your eyes till the morning sun does rise. From the end of the telescope, where Emily's blinking eye peered out into the darkness, the angle and destination of her magnified vision shot up into the stratosphere, out into the solar system, zipping past the gas giants, past the twin ice giants, through the Kuiper belt, and out into the far-flung scattered reaches of unnamed space, where the once tiny smudges, refracting off the tiny mirrors in Emily's Celestron 1400 loomed and grew as they neared. At first it looked like a cosmic cloud, or even a small, swirling galaxy moving at a speed that appeared glacial at a glance until the size of the object was fully realized. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. The cloud moved closer, determined, and details materialized. Grasping tentacles, swirling gaps that could only be mouths capable of swallowing stars, lined up with grinding teeth the size of moons, slowly blinking eyes as large as Jupiter, glaring out into an unprepared and barely remembered dimension. And this was just the first, as behind it an armada of similar creatures of immeasurable vastness followed its slug trail of wrecked planets and digested suns. This impossible swarm had awoken from a billion years' slumber at the center of infinity and were now moving through our corner of spatial plane, devouring entire constellations, consuming the very fabric of our universe, leaving a nothingness of collapsing space in their wake. How I wonder what you are. Somewhere far, far away, a little girl, too old for her skin, laughed and spoke her mother's name, while a father sat silent for as long as he could.